We are back for our next lesson. This is going to be about Pirates of the Caribbean, and we're going to deal today with measures 68 all the way over to 84. So that includes a repeat sign. You can see that in your parts. We're going to go through this lesson. Mr. West.
Good morning, guys, or afternoon, whenever you're watching this.
And I kind of will walk you through this lesson part by part. So we're going to start with part one. First thing we want to do is kind of backtrack a little bit. If you look before 58, you're going to notice that we're in 3/4 time signatures. So each measure gets 3 beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Also, if you plan to play this along with the recording that we had posted in the previous post, you can go back and refer to that. Check the link out. It shows the music as you scroll through, and it plays the sound back for you, the full band arrangement. It's really fun to do that. You want to queue up to 1 minute and 49 seconds in that video to start at the right time. So let's take a look at 68, part 1. So this is flutes, clarinet 1, and trumpet 1. This is going to contain most of the melody. Mr. West has a comment.
It also includes the mallet part as well for you bell players out there, right, Mr. Suchek?
Absolutely, yeah. So mallets, your only difference is you'll see at 76 that you kind of rest while the others continue some parts. But you do play this main melody. So let's start to take a look at 68. The rhythm in the first 2 bars is 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3. I'll play it on my piano as well as some other voices. So here's how 68 is going to sound, 2 bars. Notice that there's an accent on the first quarter note. The 8th notes are not accented, so they can be a little bit more subdued. And then you notice that I played those 3 descending quarter notes with a staccato, kind of shortening those notes so that there's a little space between. The phrase kind of continues. It's really nothing too difficult as we get through this part. I'm going to play the whole phrase at 68. I'm not going to take the repeat, but just kind of listen to how it should sound slowly. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so a couple things of note here. Those last articulations, you see some quarter notes that kind of ascend at the end, and they have a line above them for the flutes. The clarinets, I believe that's the same case. Some of those notes have lines below them. That's tenuto, which means it's just the opposite of staccato. You play those for full duration. So flutes, you'll notice that in the 5th measure, we're kind of ascending up into a higher range. You actually get to choose in this first part with the flute to play either the low C octave or the high C. The fingering is the same for both of those Cs. But when you go to the D, if you choose that higher D, you're going to go thumb, 2, 3, pinky. You got to blow fast air. And then E flat, all you have to do is add your left pinky like this. Pretty fast air for those. Clarinets, I'm going to give you a couple considerations here. You are playing B naturals, so right away at 68, you have 2 A's like this, and then you go to B naturals, which is this, every finger that you have on both hands, except obviously the right thumb that's holding it down. 2 back here, cover, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the right bottom front pinky button, and also the left pinky right here. Okay, so that's the B natural. So I'm going to kind of show you guys a little bit closer. Just measure 68 for the clarinets. A again, up to the B, and then C, we just lift your left pinky, and then back to A. So one little trick that I really like to do on the clarinet is if you're playing a group of A's, B's, and C's, even G's like you see in the next measure, you can keep this right hand down the entire time, all the way through the phrase like this. You don't even have to lift this up, okay? So that's a fun little trick that you can use. Any other comments, Mr. West, on part 1 that I might have missed?
Sure. I'm just kind of looking through the brass stuff, which is in this case first trumpet, as well as the bell stuff as well, while Mr. Suchek is tackling some of the woodwind things. So for you first trumpet players out there who are confident in your high range playing, as I look through this section, I'm noticing kind of like Mr. Suchek was talking about with the woodwind parts, that we go pretty high in our range around the fourth measure, starting at 68. So if you count ahead at 68, 4 measures, there's the ascending quarter notes there, trumpet players, starting on a B, which all of the Bs in this particular section of the song are second finger B. And we ascend to C, which is open. The next note, the final quarter note in that fourth measure of 68 is a D, which is going to be with our first finger. And then we continue to ascend. The next note, which is the top space on the staff, is going to be E, which is open. And then the very top note on this section of music is an F, which is first finger. So there's a lot, when you get that high in the range, trumpet players, there's a lot of alternating between open fingering and first finger use up there. So check that out as you're playing to the melody. Also, for all of you that are on this first part, one thing that I like to specifically make mention of when we play a song that's familiar to us, because we've probably seen this movie, is when things deviate a little bit from how they sound in the movie. Particularly in this section, the fifth measure is maybe just a little bit different than what we're used to in the movie. So just be careful that you're reading those notes and rhythms properly. You may realize that there's like a note missing from the melody that you recognize, okay? Bell players, again, the range is higher here, so there's some notes on the staff that you haven't necessarily familiarized yourself with reading wise as we reach the end of that line, starting where 68 is, like in measure 72, the final measure of that line goes C, C, D, E flat, bell players. Okay, those are notes that we know, but we usually know them a little bit lower on your instruments. So we're playing C, C, D, E flat, but they're going to be a little further to the right on your bell kits.
All right, so I'm going to talk about 76. I'm going to play this with the clarinet. This is the kind of punchy percussive section that doesn't have quite as many notes. So you need to count your rests really carefully here. So if we're playing through 76, I'll count you off. We're starting with this E clarinets, F, E, 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 D. I'll play all the way slowly from 76 to 84. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's a really fun little lick there at 83, the measure before where we end today at 84. We have an A for the clarinets, and then jump down to a C, slur to an E, A to C is a slur, and then we end on the E at 84. Okay, so for flutes, that's going to be B flat, D, G, B flat, up to your high D. Mr. West is going to chime in.
Yeah, I just want to make mention as I'm reading through the brass parts as well, it's the exact same thing. So first trumpet players, if you're listening to Mr. Suchek's explanation of the notes in 83, it's the exact same notation for you first trumpet players. You have that A that drops all the way down to C, and then you ascend through some notes in there, which includes some lip slurring of sorts. So just if you're listening to Mr. Suchek play, it's going to sound the exact same for you first trumpet players.
Alrighty, so let's take a look at part 2. This, again, if you remember from last time, this includes the clarinet 2-part, saxophone 1, and also trumpet 2. So I'm going to start with the clarinet 2-part. At measure 68, we are going to be kind of accompanying the melody that we heard from the first voices. Pretty simple stuff here. We play on beat 1 and sometimes on beat 3. Here's 68 to 76. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, and okay, so we end at 76 on the C, which for some of you might be a little bit new, which is both thumb buttons, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, bottom right pinky like this. Otherwise, it's relatively simple. If you look at 71, that is a B. We just kind of talked about this with the first part. But again, just to review that, it's both thumbs, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, both pinkies, bottom, front, and inside left, like this. Okay? So saxophones, your first part is in part 2 here. This is the first saxophone. And I'm gonna start at 68. Pretty simple notes. Just be aware of the key signature that dictates F sharps with the second button. Okay, so here's 68 saxophones. 1, 2, 3. Up to the high G at 76, which is just like G with the thumb down. Okay, really nothing too difficult there. Mr. West, go ahead and chime in with the high brass parts.
Yeah, so this is for this is the second trumpet parts. So for those of you that aren't comfortable playing as high as the first trumpet part goes in part 1, this is much more in our comfort zone. So again, it sounds exactly like what Mr. Suchek was just playing on clarinet and saxophone. But just to give you some trumpet-specific ideas here, trumpets, look at measure 71. As Mr. Suchek says, that's a B of the natural variety, so second finger B. I'll go ahead and try to play through this for you, trumpets, just so you hear it on a trumpet. Feel free to rewind to this portion of the video if you want to try to play along with me. So your first note's that A, 1, 2, and then we move on from there. So here's 68. 1, ready, go. Sorry. So as I look at measure 75 trumpets, just to kind of help clear up the fingering as you move through those eighth notes, we start down at C, which is going to be obviously open. We move up to E with 1 and 2, and then we go to A's, which stays on 1 and 2. Well, you just have to change the way that you're moving your air and the strength within your lips. And then we land at 76 on a high C. And I'll just go ahead and continue on into 76 since we're at that point in the music. Trumpets, we just continue on a lot of C's in this section. Notice we have some accents, right? And also those lines we talked about earlier, which mean tenuto, which means we're going to play those notes very connected, all right? As we move on into 79, we have C's and B's, and again, that's going to be second finger B's trumpets, okay? And then down to some A's. And then as you look at the measures going into 84, measures 82 and 83, we have a G sharp here, trumpets, in measure 82. That's going to be the same as A flat, if you're familiar with that note. That's going to be 2 and 3. So I'm going to play that measure. It goes G sharp, A, and then G sharp again, even though it's not labeled, it stays G sharp. So that's going to sound like this, trumpets. That's measure 82, right? Those notes are very close together. Then we go down to an E at 83, and then we have this really expansive range of notes on eighth notes in A3, which starts all the way down at a low A, which is going to be 1 and 2, and then to a C, and then to an E, and then to an A, which stays 1 and 2, and then we land on C at the end. And Mr. Suchek will demonstrate that for you clearly in terms of how that sounds when he goes through the woodwind parts.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start at measure 82, which for clarinets is also G sharp. That's this side button right here. Saxophones, you have a D sharp, which I'll just show you so you can remember. We talked about this last time, but you might have forgotten it's D plus this key right here. That's the D sharp. And that stays both the first and third note of that measure. So it's going to sound like this. I'm going to go nice and slowly. 1, 2, 3. Kind of hear that ascending, low to high, up to the C. Okay, so that takes you all the way to the end of that excerpt for part 2. We're going to move on now to part 3, and I will address, this is clarinet 3 and saxophone 2. Some pretty interesting stuff here. You have some options, clarinets, which I think is really cool. You can either play all low notes or you can play all high notes. So I'm going to kind of show you both. 68 for the clarinet 3 part here is low E, 2, 3, 2, 3, and F natural. here's a B natural like this, second finger. And then I really like this range of the clarinet. Right before 76, you're going to go down to a low A without the long thumb button, just the low thumb button like this. A, C, C, E, E. Okay, so if you are adventurous enough to do the upper parts, those are going to be pretty high, but it's really manageable because as long as you keep these two thumbs down, you're using simple fingering. So the first one is E with like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, plus both thumbs back here, that's E. Okay, then you lift a finger and go to F, and then we go up to a G on 78, which is like this. Excuse me, I skipped a line. So we're going E, and then to D, sorry, it's 69, and then now up to G, which is just 3 buttons. It's like your C in the low range, but you add this extra thumb button like this. Sounds like this. Okay, and then you go back to F, and then down to this B with all the fingers, and then A, C, C, E, E, which takes you to 76. There's not really a whole lot of difference in the next several bars for this voice until you get to 82, in which case we have B, C, B, C, A, C, E, E. Okay, so I'll play the upper voice first. And again, you'll notice that this is the harmony portion of the song. It's a supportive voice, so it's not going to sound exactly like the melody. But again, if you play this along with the recording, it's going to sound super cool, and this contributes a lot. The lower part is B, C, low A, and then C, E, E. Here it is. Okay. For the saxophone part, your notes are really simple. You have B's, A's, B's, D, C's. Really nothing too tricky here until you get to the last 2 bars. I'll just kind of talk about that for a second. 82 in this third part, saxophone 2 is F sharp, G, F sharp, G, E. 2 fingers on the bottom hand, and then G, B, B. Okay, nothing really too difficult. I think as long as you are adhering to the rhythms that we've talked about, you should be fine. Let's move on to part 5 with Mr. West.
Yeah, part 5 is going to include our low brass, so trombone players, as well as bass guitar Jude. And they are identical in terms of notes and rhythms. So while I'm going to talk specifically about like brass fingerings and stuff, the bass guitar part plays all of the same notes and rhythms. So pay attention to that, please. So at 68, trombones and baritones, we are playing a lot of the same rhythmic figures as some of those other supporting upper voices. Just pay attention through the course of this to the special articulations that we have here in low brass. So we have some accents and we also have some staccatos. So more or less everything in this is going to be fairly shorter and separated until we get to the end of this first section. So like measure 75, we have the lines, which indicate tenuto. So we're going to play those with much more length and connection. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go through this. The notes and rhythms should be fairly straightforward. We have things start on a G, which is going to be 4th position for the trombones, 1 and 2 if you're playing baritone. And then everything else is in a pretty comfortable range. We have some D's, which is also 1 and 2, some C's, which is 1 and 3 baritone, or D's being 4th position for trombone and C's being 6th position. So I'm just going to play through some of this, and you can feel free to follow along at 68. First note starts way up here. Boom, and we're going to keep going from there. Here's 68. 1, ready, go. That wasn't a very good start. Let's try that again, guys. Did you notice how at the very end there's a measure of short notes and then a measure of long notes in measures 74 and 75. Cool? So again, those notes and rhythms should be fairly easy. Just make sure that we're comfortable with where the G's are on our instruments. Again, baritones G 1 and 2. G for the trombone is position 4. All right. 76, things start to get more elongated with these dotted half notes, which are going to be 3 counts each. We actually start at 76 with 2 dotted half notes tied together. So that's going to be 3 plus 3 for a total of 6 beats. Again, I'm just going to play through this section. You can feel free to follow along, and then I'll give you a couple of more things to think about as we read through that section. Here's 76. Ready? 1, 2. That last note was the landing point at 84. So the only thing that's a little bit new in that section that we need to make sure we're comfortable with is measure 78 is a really high B flat, which is going to be open baritones or first position for the trombones. Cool. Jude, let me look at your part real quick. I believe that's the same for you. Yeah, so it's a high B flat for you as well. So it's going to sound similar to the lowest B, second line B flat, but an octave higher. I think that's all I have for that, Mr. Suchek, unless you have anything to add.
No, that's great. So we're going to move to the snare part. And this is actually really interesting. I find that the snare part in this section of the piece is kind of fun to play as long as you're able to count the rests. So at 76, we start with a quarter note, 1, and then we have a rest. I wouldn't discourage you from adding some sort of time during this part. 1, 2, 3. If you want to do that, you can do that. The part before that I'll get to in a little bit because it's really simple. But let's go through this 76 part. So we have a 1 rest, and then there's a buzz roll that's a 16, or excuse me, it's a quarter note. I want you to think of this as 4 16th notes with buzzes on them like this. I don't know if you can see that, but just think of 3 E enda, and you're gonna buzz through like that. So 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, flam, 2 and 3 and. That's the first 4 bars of 76, just to be clear. We do that again. 1, ready, and 1, rest, rest. Okay. Now the next part has some flams on beat 2, so just be aware of where those come in. I would play those as left flams so that you can continue with the right hand into the 8th note. So 1, flam, 3 and 1, flam, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 and 3 and 84. Okay? Here again, quite simple, but it should be really enjoyable to play along with the recording, especially at the tempo that the recording is kind of chucking by. So look at 68 real quick. It says on the rim. I have a practice pad here, so I don't have a rim, but you could just on your snare drum, just find the front half of the rim, and just play up there. We're gonna go 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1. Kind of keeps going. 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3. And then it says on head, so move to the edge of the head, and then it starts soft and crescendos into 76. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. Okay, then you continue from there. That is pretty much going to do it for these parts. Mr. West has a couple finishing comments for us.
Yeah, as I'm just looking through the drum parts, the one piece of advice that I would give you, snare drummers, is to try to use the same sticking every time that you go through this section. And that might mean writing some things down. We like to try to stick to what we call natural sticking, which in this case, like at measure 68, every quarter note's going to be on a right hand, and you're going to start every group of 8th notes on a right hand as well. It should keep the right hand moving pretty steadily through this entire section, 68 to 76. Once you get to 76, snare drummers, I would more or less kind of alternate the sticking, other than like the buzz, like Mr. Suchek walked you through the buzz rules. But as you play through the rhythms, starting at 79, a lot of that's going to be alternating. Again, 8th notes should pretty much always start on a right hand. But yeah, so just be consistent with your sticking throughout anything that you play, snare drummers. That's all, Mr. Suchek.
All right, so that is going to conclude our lesson for today. Next week, you can look forward to us digging into the beginning section, measure 5, is a really kind of famous capstone of this movie soundtrack, which I think you'll enjoy to learn. It's a little harder as well, so for those of you that are looking for more of a challenge, you can kind of look at that ahead of time, and we'll talk about it next week. Please feel free to reach out to us. If you find that you're succeeding, we want to know. It's hard for us just to give a lesson to the air like this, so we'd love some feedback. If you guys are playing well, send us a video, send us an email. Anything that you can do to like stay engaged with us would be really appreciated. That's all I've got. I'm sure Mr. West wants to say goodbye, so you guys have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. We miss you. We wish we could be doing this with you in person, but like Mr. Suchek said, feel free to reach out to us. You can comment on Facebook or email us. If you're not sure what our emails are, it's the same formula for each of us. First initial, last name, @carrollhighschool.org. That would be A West for me, or C Suchek for Mr. Suchek. Cool. We'll see you guys soon. Have fun with us this week.